Committee on Oversight and Government Reform will come to order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare a recess at any time. I want to thank everybody for being here. This is, as we kick off the 115th Congress, we're doing as we had done in the 114th Congress, and having our first major full committee hearing with our inspectors general. We cannot thank you enough for the great work that you do. In fact, we have a packed audience here, and if I can indulge me here for a moment, we'll allow those that are testifying to stay seated, but if you're part of that Inspector General community, either as staff or the Inspector General, if you could please stand for a moment. I'd like to recognize those of you.
Wow.
Oh, very good. Thank you, thank you, thank you. On behalf of all of us that serve here, thank you for your service and your interest, and we want you to know how deeply valued you are in the work that you do. One of my greater fears is that you do all this work and that we're not doing enough to make sure that we're paying attention to it and that we're actually acting on it. You know, we're not only the Oversight Committee, but we're also the Government Reform Committee. So we want to be able to take that good work that you do and translate it into action that actually helps solve the problem. So you're not continuing to look at the same problem year after year after year, and that should be such a flashing red light for this committee and everything that they do. The Inspectors General are embedded into the federal government to protect taxpayers, and they're really the first line of defense against waste, fraud, and abuse. Nonpartisan, they're as patriots to understand what's happening in the bowels of this large bureaucracy. In the fiscal year 2015, it's estimated that the Inspectors General saved roughly $37 billion annually with just a budget of $2.7 billion. Now, that's a pretty good rate of return and a pretty good evidence that the money we spend in the Inspector General community is certainly worth the effort. Again, this is the first committee, but the first hearing, and as I kind of get into the details of some of this, I want to address something that did pop up in the news. There was a mistake that was made where a junior member of the transition team left a message, and I'm not sure if it was, I know it was on at least one person's voicemail, and I don't know if it was on all of your voicemail, it's saying that they're working on a temporary basis. That was later clarified by a more senior person that that was not the case. And I think, as the Inspector General Horowitz will say, and I want to let you know that I've spoken with the General Counsel at the White House on this topic. I think it's safe to say that that was a mistake. They wish it hadn't happened. It's not their approach. It's not their intention. As I said mentioned in a committee hearing yesterday, I had an opportunity to visit with the President when he visited us in Philadelphia last week. It was a very brief conversation, but he thanked me for the work that we were doing on oversight. He said, continue to go and do what you're going to do. Even though I'm the President, just you need to keep looking at the federal government, the bureaucracy, and that's the impression, but that's also literally what they have told me. When I spoke with Don McGahn, who is the White House General Counsel, he assured me that was not the case, and I'm glad that we've gotten that clarified. We would all be concerned on both sides of the aisle if that was the approach that they were taking, and they shouldn't have done that. It was a junior person, and you need to let me know if you're seeing or hearing anything to the contrary, but I've been assured that that is not what they're doing. This was a mistake that also happened in the Obama administration in 2009. We went to fire Mr. Walpin, then the IG for the Corporation of National and Community Service. That firing came without the President giving the legally required notice to Congress, and was the only IG firing by a President in the last 35 years. Mr. Walpin later sued, saying the firing was retaliation for an investigation he undertook. With each new administration, I'm sure there's a learning curve, and hopefully they've learned that lesson. So I also think it's very important for the vacancies that there are there, that those are filled in a swift manner. Now, we're not in total control of that here in the House. We get more frustrations coming out of the Senate, and you can understand the large amount of people that have to go through that confirmation process, from a Supreme Court justice to cabinet level to others that need to go through the Senate confirmation. I hope that that's swift. I'm not in total control of that here in the House, like I said, but I will do everything I can to encourage and push and say to the White House and to this administration, it is in their best interest, to have a vibrant Inspector General community. People act best when they're having someone look over their shoulder. And it protects us all, protects the taxpayers, it protects the White House, it protects Congress, it protects everybody. So we will take that approach as we do that. In the year 2014, 47 Inspectors General sent a letter to this committee and to the Senate Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee detailing significant access problems. For example, the Peace Corps Inspector General, who's here with us, was being denied access to files related to sexual assault of Peace Corps volunteers and by the Peace Corps General Counsel. Denying access to files is something I have fought. Chairman Issa fought before me, and we will continue to fight as a committee. In another instance, the Chemical Safety Board told the EPA Inspector General would not provide documents based on attorney-client privilege, a new creative way to suggest that they didn't have to be open, transparent, or allowing you access to the information you need. In the last 2 years, we've worked closely with Ranking Member Cummings to craft legislation to ensure the Inspectors General can do their job, and I want to thank Mr. Cummings personally for his steadfast support on these issues, and I think we've worked well on them. The result of the cooperation was the IG Empowerment Act of 2016, which was signed into law in December, and it took a lot of lifting to get there, but not nearly the amount of lifting that you do and the frustration that you've been bumping up against for so long. The bill made clear that the Inspectors General can only be denied documents based on explicit statutory prohibitions, not vague privileges or strained readings of other statutes. In addition, the Act streamlined investigation procedures, instituted new reporting requirements to improve transparency, and streamlined the investigation process to make IG's operations more efficient. We will continue to support the Inspectors General in this new Congress as these issues may arise again. One issue carried over from the last Congress that should be addressed again is the vacancies. As of 2015, the average duration of an IG vacancy, this is the average, during the past administration was 613 days, far in excess of the previous administrations. That's unacceptable, and we have got to work to speed that up. I hope the new administration makes it a priority to fill these vacancies, and we will push them to do so. Finally, I'd like to hear from our witnesses on the process of criminal referrals by the Inspectors General. Our IGs do great work conducting investigations, and many times their work culminates in a referral to the Department of Justice for possible prosecution. There's little transparency regarding the volume, evaluation, or outcome of these referrals. Frustratingly, I had been peppering the Department of Justice to provide us such stats, but they are just simply have stonewalled us for years during the Obama administration. The IG Empowerment Act attempts to increase the transparency by requiring reports to Congress on the referral data. If I know what is being referred directly to the Department of Justice, I then have a better fact pattern to push the Department of Justice to say, why don't you ever prosecute these people? It's not good enough to say, well, just fire them. If you want a remedy, just fire them. But the civil service reform, which we're going to go through in this Congress, they're so prohibitive on firing people. It's this vicious circle where the bad apples that are there causing the most harm often continue to sit in their seats, take income, while harming the rest of the process, their fellow employees, the departments, the agencies, and ultimately the taxpayers. So we'd like to hear more about the referral process and what can be done to better expose it. And we will do our part to push the Department of Justice or the local, or whatever the appropriate law enforcement is to actually, or prosecutors to actually push on this. And I again, want to thank you all for the great work that you do. You represent literally thousands of people who spend their lives doing this. We can't thank them enough, and appreciate you all attending today, and thank the witnesses in particular. So with that, I'll now recognize the ranking member, Mr. Cummings.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for calling this hearing. Let me say to all of the Inspector Generals and the staff here today, I want to thank you. But as the Chairman was talking, I thought it would be appropriate that I share with you a question that has come to me over and over and over again. And the question is when some of these issues came up, people have asked me about the Inspector Generals. They say, do you trust the Inspector Generals? And I say, yes. But the other question they ask is, well, if the Inspector Generals were replaced, how would you feel about that? I said, first of all, the people who hold these positions are people who are independent. And if they felt that they could not be independent, they would not take the positions. And so I would feel comfortable with our Inspector Generals, and I want to thank you. I echo the words of the Chairman. We trust you. We believe in you. We thank you. We realize that so many of you could be doing so many other jobs, probably making a lot more money, but you are doing the job that feeds your souls. And so we thank you. You do an extraordinary job, and we in Congress rely on you for exactly these reasons. The title of today's hearing is Empowering Inspector Generals. Our committee has acted in a bipartisan manner under both Democratic and Republican leadership to promote the critical work of IGs. For example, on December 16, 2016, President Obama signed into law the Bipartisan Inspector General Empowerment Act of 2016. However, one thing that disempowers Inspector Generals is when they are threatened with retaliation for reporting waste, fraud, and abuse, or even worse, threatened with termination. When that happens, it's up to this committee to step in, investigate, and protect our IGs. Yesterday, I sent a letter along with Vice-Ranking Member of this committee, Mr. Connolly, to the White House, Counsel Don McGahn. I raised concerns about the disturbing reports that Trump officials threatened to remove numerous Inspector Generals after the inauguration. This all started on Friday, January 13. The Trump team officials assigned to various federal agencies called to inform their respective IGs that their positions were only, and I quote, temporary, end of quote. They also reportedly informed several IGs that they should begin looking for other employment. The Inspectors Generals who were concerned about these anonymous calls, immediately began contacting leaders of their organizing body, the Council of Inspectors General, on integrity and efficiency. As we understand it, after urgent calls all over the weekend, some IGs were informed that higher-level officials on the Trump team decided to reverse this misguided action. The IGs were told that these calls were erroneous. They were told they never should have been made. If this indeed occurred, that would be a small relief. But here is why I remain concerned. You know, a lot of people say, you know, we ought to cross that bridge when we get to it. Ladies and gentlemen, we're at the bridge. We have now obtained what we believe is the email that the Trump team sent out to their political officials assigned to the federal agencies. This email was sent after normal business hours on the evening of Friday, January 13. It directed Trump staffers to make the calls, and I quote, tonight, end of quote. in all capital letters and later in bold. They were instructed to tell the IGs that they were staying over into the Trump administration only, and I quote, on a temporary basis, end of quote. The email also references vetting the IGs, but does not explain on what basis. This email demonstrates that these calls were not isolated incidents. These calls were not isolated incidents. This was a coordinated campaign to target inspectors general that someone in the Trump team planned, approved, organized, and executed across multiple agencies. The problem is that we still do not know who. Whoever approved these calls had absolutely horrendous judgment and should not be allowed anywhere near the reins of power. We also still do not know who ultimately reversed this terrible approach. And we still have no official communication confirming that this reversal, in fact, applies to all the IGs. So yesterday, we wrote to the White House counsel asking him these questions. Most importantly, we asked for official confirmation that President Trump has no plans to fire any IGs now that he has been sworn in. I ask unanimous consent that our letter be made part of the official record, Mr. Chairman.
The letter without objection so ordered, but I would like to see the email, which you've not shared with us, I don't believe.
We did share it.
We just gave it to you, okay.
We shared it with you early this morning. I also asked that the committee staff conduct a transcribed interview of the Trump official who sent this email so that we can investigate this matter. We have several of the IGs here today so we can get their accounts of what happened. At the broadest level, we want to make sure that every single inspector general has been told in no uncertain terms that their jobs are safe. Unfortunately, these actions are part of a troubling pattern of misguided and politically motivated attacks on government watchdogs, ethics experts, law enforcement officials, and career government employees. And as I said before, they say we should cross the bridge when we get to it. We're at the bridge. In December, the Trump team sent a questionnaire to the Energy, and listen to this. In December, the Trump team sent a questionnaire to the Energy Department requesting a list of all individuals who took part in international climate talks over the past 5 years. We're at the bridge. In January, White House Chief of Staff Reince Priebus issued a veiled threat to the Director of the Office of Government Ethics that he, quote, ought to be careful, unquote, unquote, in his criticism of President Trump's refusal to divest himself of his corporate ownership interests. The director told members of this committee, including the chairman, that this threat made him feel and his department feel, he said it was chilling, end of quote. Just last week, Trump administration officials violated multiple federal laws by imposing gag orders on the communications of federal employees, including, in some instances, communications with Congress. We're at the bridge. Within the past few days, the White House press secretary stated the Trump administration's official position that any State Department employees who disagree with the president's decisions should leave the government rather than voice their dissent. We're at the bridge. And on Monday, after the acting attorney general concluded that the president's executive order banning Muslims from entering the country may not be legal, the president fired her for saying so. What we are witnessing, ladies and gentlemen, simply is not normal. This is not normal, and we must never let it become normal. This is the United States of America. We have a Constitution, and we must be the guardians of that Constitution. And as I close, this has only been a few weeks. These actions cannot be tolerated by those of us who have as our core mission rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse. And this should be something that concerns all of us. Federal employees fear what is happening and what may be next to come. We will rely on our inspector generals more now than ever. There was just an article in the Washington Post this morning, I think it was, that talks about the many employees who are now going to inspector generals because they're afraid. And so your jobs become very, very, very significant, even more significant than they've ever been, because people see you as the last line of defense. And I hope that all of my Republican and Democratic colleagues will join together in a bipartisan manner to support our inspector generals in their mission. And let me say this, I thank the chairman because he has been one of the strongest folks on this committee to make it clear that we will protect whistleblowers, that we will protect federal employees, that we will protect those who want to make our government the best that it can be. He has also been a strong advocate for marching forward to make sure all of us make this, our great nation, a more perfect union. And with that, I yield back.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Point of inquiry. I'm looking at the redacted version of this email, and some of the redactions we'd like to know more about, such as who besides the author it was to be copied to, and of course who it was sent to. Is there an unredacted version of this, to your knowledge, or maybe to the minority leader?
We'll work with their staff to figure out.
Yeah, I just appreciate being able to see it in camera. It'd be helpful as we try to correct this.
All right. All right.
Let's move on. We will hold the record open for 5 legislative days for any members who would like to submit a written statement. We'll now recognize our panel of witnesses. We're pleased to welcome the Honorable Michael Horowitz, Chair of the Council of the Inspectors General on Integrity, Efficiency, and the Inspector General for the United States Department of Justice. We have worked closely with Mr. Horowitz through the years and enjoy his perspective and professionalism in what he does, and we appreciate you being here, sir. The Honorable Kathy Buller, who's the Executive Chair of the Legislation Committee on the Council of Inspectors General on Integrity and Efficiency, and the Inspector General at the Peace Corps. She just testified here as well, and we appreciate you being here. The Honorable Scott Dahl, the Inspector General at the United States Department of Labor. Thank you, sir, for being here, as well as the Honorable John Roth, the Inspector General at the United States Department of Homeland Security, who's also testified a number of times before this committee. As you know, pursuant to committee rules, all witnesses are to be sworn before they testify. So if you'll please rise and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. Let the record reflect that all the witnesses answered in the affirmative. You know the drill. I don't need to explain the rules. As Trey Gowdy likes to say, when you see the yellow button, speed up. That's what we do when we get to a stoplight. That's what you need to do here, too. So we'll give you great latitude. Mr. Horowitz, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Cummings, members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me to testify today. The IG community sincerely appreciates this committee's steadfast support over the years. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Cummings, Congressman Meadows, for your sponsorship of the landmark IG Empowerment Act, and for the committee's unyielding work in making sure it got passed. Congress could not have spoken louder or clearer about its bipartisan support for giving IGs the tools we need to do our important oversight work. IGs are the representatives of the taxpayers, making sure their money is being used efficiently and effectively, and that waste, fraud, abuse, and mismanagement are rooted out. The independence of IGs is the foundation of our work, allowing us to conduct nonpartisan, objective oversight. That work in FY 2015, as the Chairman noted, resulted in the IG community identifying approximately $26 billion in potential savings, with which agency management agreed, and additionally, our criminal and civil cases identifying or allowing agencies to receive or recover over $10 billion. Compared to the IG community's aggregate budget of about $2.7 billion, the recoveries and potential savings represent about a $14 return on every dollar invested by the OIGs, in the OIGs by the Congress. OIGs also issue recommendations to address fundamental issues of agency management identified in our audits and reviews. We appreciate the committee's interest in these recommendations, and as you are aware, there are indeed thousands of open recommendations across the OIG community. We look forward to working with the new administration to address them. Let me briefly highlight some other key issues for the community. First, there are numerous IG vacancies, as the Chairman noted, and it is critical that they be filled promptly. 9 of 36 presidentially appointed Senate-confirmed IG positions are vacant. That's 25% of those positions. And the vacancies are at some of our largest agencies. By law, IGs must be selected without regard to political affiliation and based solely on the basis of their integrity and demonstrated ability and certain proficiencies. And under the IG Act, the Council of IGs is responsible for recommending candidates with exemplary qualifications for these positions. We look forward to continuing to fulfill this role with the new administration and hope it makes filling IG vacancies a priority. Second, we're concerned about the potential impact of the hiring freeze. As careful stewards of taxpayer money, we fully appreciate and respect the importance of prudently allocating Federal resources. However, given our track record of returning to the Treasury far more money than we are budgeted, we believe careful consideration should be given before impacting our ability to root out waste, fraud, and abuse. OIGs were hit particularly hard during sequestration, and it had a significant impact on our work. We look forward to working with the incoming OMB Director on these issues. Finally, I want to discuss the importance of whistleblowers to our work. Whistleblowers perform an invaluable service when they come forward with evidence of waste, fraud, abuse, or mismanagement, and they never should suffer reprisal for doing so. They provide OIGs with critical information, and we want to make sure they are comfortable doing so. At the Council of IGs, we've created a Whistleblower Ombudsman Working Group to consider best practices that will help us better address the wide range of issues related to whistleblowers. In my office, we're dedicating ever-increasing resources to handle our substantially increasing docket of whistleblower retaliation allegations involving FBI employees and employees of contractors and grant recipients. However, our ability to fulfill the additional responsibilities that recent legislation has placed on us, and which we welcomed, require sufficient staffing. Otherwise, it will be difficult for us to maintain and continue our other oversight work as our whistleblower retaliation docket continues to grow. We look forward to working with the committee, with the incoming administration, the bipartisan House and Senate whistleblower caucuses to address these whistleblower issues. Thank you again for the committee's strong support, and I'd be pleased to answer any questions the committee may have.
Thank you. Ms. Buller, am I pronouncing it right? I want to make sure. I want to say Bueller, but that's just because I watched that show so many times. But you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Chaffetz, Ranking Member Cummings, and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for inviting me to appear before you today to discuss the important work of IGs. As Chair of the Legislation Committee for the Council of Inspectors General for Integrity and Efficiency, and as one of the IGs whose access was denied by the agency I oversee, my testimony underscores our appreciation for the bipartisan support we receive from this committee and from Congress. 2 years ago, I testified before this committee about the struggles my office faced in obtaining the information we needed to do our job. The former General Counsel of the Peace Corps erroneously interpreted a law in a way that effectively kept my office, Congress, and the American public in the dark about critical information regarding care provided to Peace Corps volunteers who experienced sexual assault. My office was not alone. Starting in 2010, other agencies began denying or delaying access to information, including the Departments of Justice, Commerce, and Treasury, as well as the Chemical Safety and Hazard Investigation Board. In 2015, DOJ's Office of Legal Counsel issued a legal opinion that threatened the independence of all IGs and challenged the access that is central to IG oversight. It was clear that congressional action was needed. Thanks in part to the bipartisan efforts of this committee and its staff, the passage of the Inspector General Empowerment Act restores what Congress intended, that IGs have the right to access all materials and documents necessary to oversee their agencies. At the Peace Corps, we have begun unwinding the damage caused by the access-denying policies. We are working with the agency to fully restore our access to the records we need to ensure that Peace Corps volunteers who have been sexually assaulted receive the care that they deserve. The IG Empowerment Act not only restored the IG community's right of unfettered access, but it also provided tools to ensure our independence and improve our oversight authority. In particular, exemptions from the Computer Matching Act and Paperwork Reduction Act will ensure IG independence and will help us more effectively prevent and detect fraud and conduct timely surveys without being subject to the approval from our agencies we oversee. In short, your bipartisan support for IGs has empowered inspectors general across the federal government. In my role as chair of the SIGI Legislation Committee, I liaise with Congress on legislative matters that affect the IG community. One role of our committee is to provide assistance to Congress as it considers legislation to improve IG's ability to carry out the oversight mission that taxpayers and Congress expect. I want to briefly mention 4 priority items that the IG community has identified that would improve our ability to oversee the federal government. First, our community would like to work with Congress to protect information that can be used to exploit cybersecurity vulnerabilities. Our reviews, including reviews requested by Congress, identify weaknesses in federal IT systems. This information could be a roadmap for those who want to do harm. While classified and law enforcement information is protected from public disclosure, there is no single protection that covers all IT security vulnerability information. Second, the IG community recommends that IGs have the authority to compel testimony of those subject to our oversight. This authority was included in a bill that passed this committee and the House during the last Congress. Our work can be substantially hampered by the inability to compel the testimony of witnesses who have information that cannot be obtained by other means. While this authority was not included in the bill that became law, we are encouraged by this committee's continued consideration and bipartisan support for testimonial subpoena for authority for IGs. Third, removal of IGs requires congressional notification at least 30 days before removal, providing a crucial safeguard to protect our independence. This safeguard can be defeated if an IG is placed in a paid or unpaid non-duty status, effectively silencing IGs without notifying Congress. The IG community supports additional legislative protections to IG independence to ensure that such personnel actions involving an IG are not abused. Finally, legislative reforms have potential to make the Program Fraud Civil Remedies Act a significant tool to recover fraudulent expenditures for the benefit of the taxpayers. This act allows for recoveries in cases of small dollar fraud or in cases DOJ does not accept for prosecution. If used to its full potential, the recoveries could be significant. To conclude, the IG community is grateful for the steadfast bipartisan support it has received from Congress and from this committee. We look forward to our future cooperation to ensure integrity and efficiency in the federal government. I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Mr. Dahl, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Chaffetz, Ranking Member Cummings, and members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me to testify today on the work of OIGs. Let me begin by highlighting a stark example of the value of our work and the importance of OIG access to the information we need. In 2015, 2 students were killed at different Department of Labor Job Corps centers, both allegedly by their fellow students. In one case, the student was shot and killed in his dorm room at the St. Louis Center. In the other case, the student was brutally killed next to the Florida Homestead Center, resulting in the need to transfer or relocate more than 350 students. These tragic cases and other serious incidents make clear why we have identified the safety and security at Job Corps centers as the top management challenge for the department. Our auditors had previously analyzed Job Corps data that revealed some centers had failed to report and investigate serious misconduct, including assaults and drug abuse. Our current review has identified additional concerns, such as problems with the centers interacting with law enforcement, inadequate camera monitoring and security staffing, and very limited use of employee background checks. Mr. Chairman, this is just one of many examples that show the significant impact from the work of OIG staff, who demonstrate daily their dedication to the OIG mission of promoting efficiency and effectiveness in government programs and of combating fraud, waste, and abuse. I also express our appreciation, as Michael and Kathy have, for the committee's strong support of the efforts of all OIGs and for addressing the barriers that exist in our work. In that vein, we commend the committee's bipartisan efforts towards the passage of the IG Empowerment Act. We're pleased that Congress has reaffirmed the authority of OIGs to have unfettered access to records. This access is essential to our work. Mr. Chairman, another example of the value of OIG oversight is in our work on the abuse and rising costs of compounded drug medications in the Federal Employees Compensation Act, or FECA program. The cost of compounded drugs in FECA have skyrocketed from approximately $2 million in 2011 to nearly $240 million in 2016, more than a 100-fold increase, substantially surpassing the costs of all other drugs combined. Our current investigations in this area have focused on fraud schemes involving collusion between prescribing physicians and dispensing pharmacies. In one case alone, the OIG special agents have identified potential fraud that involves nearly $100 million. We are also conducting a review of the Department's management of pharmaceuticals and all of its workers' compensation programs, with a particular emphasis on compounded drugs as well as the use of opioids. In addition, my office is collaborating with the IGs of other agencies who have faced similar problems with compounded drugs to identify potential fraud and how we can change the programs. Another area of significant concern is with the fraud in DOL's foreign labor certification programs, in particular the H-1B program that allows for non-immigrant employment of foreign workers in specialized occupations. Our agents are investigating schemes involving employers filing fraudulent applications with DOL, like owners of a New York healthcare staffing company that pled guilty last year to fraudulently using the program to staff medical centers with foreign nurses. These fraud schemes often deprive U.S. workers of available work opportunities. We also partnered with DOJ and other law enforcement agencies to investigate labor trafficking as part of human trafficking. For example, our agents investigated a Texas employer who was convicted last year for underpaying foreign workers and housing them in dangerous conditions. Finally, Mr. Chairman, timely access to the Department's data systems is an area of significant concern for my office, especially for systems managed by contractors. We've encountered lengthy delays in gaining access to these data systems, and the Department has incurred significant increased costs from outsourcing this data management. These challenges we have identified underscore the importance of the committee's support for the work of the OIGs. We look forward to continuing our productive relationship with this committee and the Department in our shared goal of improving efficiency and effectiveness in Department's programs and operations. I request that my full statement be entered in the record, and I would be pleased to answer any questions that you or members of the committee may have.
Thank you. All of your full statements, written statements, will be entered into the record, of course. The Inspector General for the Department of Homeland Security, Mr. Roth, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Chairman Chaffetz, Ranking Member Cummings, and members of the committee, thank you for inviting me here to testify about Inspector General challenges and recent legislative changes enacted by the Inspector General Empowerment Act of 2016. No government agency, no matter how dysfunctional, will change of its own accord. During my tenure as Inspector General for DHS, I've witnessed 3 agencies, FEMA, TSA, and the Secret Service, that have had to confront the necessity of changing the manner in which they do business. It is a wrenching process that no agency would undergo voluntarily. Change in a bureaucracy happens as a result of 3 things: a dramatic intervening event, followed by intense scrutiny of agency programs and operations, and a resultant leadership commitment to change. Independent oversight by both the Inspector General and Congress is critical and necessary ingredient to positive, constructive change. For example, FEMA's approach to disaster response changed only after Hurricane Katrina revealed the shortfall in its operations. Consistent IG and congressional scrutiny brought further analysis to the problem, and the administration and FEMA leadership committed to change the manner in which FEMA responded to these events. As we saw in the Superstorm Sandy response, FEMA has dramatically improved its response operations as a result. TSA was likely confronted with the need to change as a result of dramatic and troubling shortfalls discovered by our covert testing program, as well as other OIG reports about deficiencies in TSA's judgment of risk in relation to expedited screening, vetting airport employees, and managing the Access Badge program. It was only through IG oversight by this and other committees, and TSA's new leadership strongly embracing the message that TSA at last publicly acknowledged the need for change and started the long road to becoming a more effective organization. Finally, as this committee well knows, the well-publicized protective failures by the Secret Service resulted in hearings and investigations by this committee, by my office, and by the Independent Protective Mission Panel. This oversight resulted in an excruciating process of examination and self-examination, which is by no means over, about the manner in which the Secret Service does business. As a result, the Secret Service has taken steps to fix some of the systemic issues that have plagued the agency over time. Oversight makes the government better and fosters positive change. The critical and skeptical review of programs and operations acts as the disinfectant of sunlight to ensure a more efficient government. It works in conjunction with the Inspector General's Act requirement that IGs keep Congress fully and currently informed of problems, abuses, and deficiencies within the department. I thank the committee for its leadership in championing the IG Empowerment Act, its support of the Inspector General community, and the cause of vigorous and independent oversight. I would also take a moment to thank my staff, who is creative, energetic, and I am proud to lead in this effort. My office will continue to conduct independent oversight over DHS's programs and operations. Although significant progress has been made, the Department continues to face long-standing, persistent challenges in overseeing and managing its Homeland Security mission. These challenges affect every aspect of the mission, from preventing terrorism and protecting our borders and transportation systems, to enforcing our immigration laws, ensuring disaster resiliency, and securing cyberspace. The Department is continually tested to work as one entity to achieve its complex mission. The key to sustaining the gains made thus far is a leadership commitment by the new administration and continued thoughtful but vigorous oversight by the Congress and my office. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my testimony. I'm happy to answer any questions of you or other members of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'll recognize myself for 5 minutes. Mr. Horowitz, let me start with you. The testimonial subpoena authority was something that we had helped to champion. Did that make it into the bill, and why didn't it make it into the bill?
It did not make it into the bill, unfortunately, despite the tremendous efforts of yourself and the ranking member in pushing it. My understanding was the Department of Justice continued to object to the very end, and in order to get the bill passed through the Senate, it had to be removed. And we hope and look forward to working with you again, and we will not walk away from the fight easily.
And at least personally, I'm going to help champion this. We'll make another run at it again, but I do believe the Inspectors General need the ability to compel testimony. We had a frustrating case where somebody was being approached, and then they just, like on a piece of paper, just said, I hereby resign, and handed it to somebody, and just thought by leaving the employee, leaving the employment of the federal government, they could just simply walk away from all this disaster that they had caused. I do believe that the Inspectors General need to have the ability to compel testimony, particularly for those investigations that you're doing. Does anybody, any of the others, wish to shed any light, or Mr. Horowitz, do you shed any light or any personal experiences within your purview that would illuminate this problem further?
I'll just mention the two examples that are public in our reports. that are of significant programs are review of the FBI's handling of 702, a high-ranking FBI official that refused to cooperate with us because he had retired, and that would have been an important interview to have in connection with our review of the President's surveillance program. Back in the 2005-06 time period, the former Attorney General and the former Deputy AAG refused to speak with us because they also had left at that time. And there are, I could give you innumerable examples where we do our administrative work and have similar situations that you've just referred to yourself, Mr. Chairman, which is resignations on the eve of testimony and our inability then to get the evidence we need.
Yes. Ms. Buller.
From a Peace Corps perspective, our employees are all term limited. So after 5 years, they time out. And so if we want to speak with them after that period of time, they're no longer a government employee. It makes our job a lot more difficult.
Very good. I really do appreciate you bringing up the idea of whistleblowers. In fact, later this afternoon, we have a hearing specifically on whistleblowers, and they do need to have unimpeded access to communicate not only with the Inspectors General, but also members of Congress, and we take that very, very seriously. I want to just, in the last minute and a half that I have here, one of the things we're deeply concerned about, we heard testimony throughout the last couple of years about sexual misconduct, sexual assault, the varying degrees of table of penalties. One of the more stark examples I like to use is within the Department of Justice, because if you look at the department, even within the Department of Justice, they have different tables of penalties, different definitions. I think that is a congressional challenge for this committee and something we do plan to address. If you can illuminate or shed any light on challenges or things that you've seen that you would think that we should address as we try to deal with this problem in making sure that we get rid of these bad apples. Does anybody have an example or something they can shed some light on? Go ahead, Mr. Horwitz.
As the committee is obviously aware from our review on the law enforcement components of the Justice Department, as the Chair mentioned, we found these wide-ranging different uses of the penalties, the terminology. We're about to go forward with a report about how the Civil Division handles these issues, and it'll again show a unique approach, different approach by another component of the Justice Department. And I think one of the things that's very important as sexual harassment becomes something that needs to be addressed forcefully and clearly is coordinated high-level approaches. It can't be decentralized within an agency. It can't be left to 30-plus components in the Justice Department to decide what 30 different ways they're going to approach it. Because the memo comes from the leadership on zero tolerance. And so if leadership is the one putting out that policy and is expecting to create that culture, they need to look at that and drive that throughout the organization equally.
Thank you. My time has expired. And now I'll recognize the Ranking Member, Mr. Cummings.
Thank you very much. Mr. Dahl, first of all, again, thank you all for being here. Mr. Dahl, you raised two issues that really caused me to pay super attention. When you raised the issue about the Job Corps, without getting into any confidential information that you can't disclose, at some point I'd really like to talk to you about that, because that is a serious problem. It's, you may not know it, but I had a nephew who was brutally killed about 5 years ago, shot to death in Norfolk. And I'd just like to talk to you about the Job Corps, because I'd like to know that young people that are going into the Job Corps are going to be safe. The other thing is the compounded drugs. 5 years now, Bernie Sanders and I and others have been working on the high price of drugs and the fraud schemes. I didn't even know you all got into that kind of stuff, but I really would like to follow up on that. Mr. Roth, we understand that a number of Inspector Generals received the phone calls from Trump officials on Friday, January 13, 2017. Some spoke directly with them, while others received voicemails. But the message was the same. The jobs were, quote, temporary. Mr. Roth, I understand that you received one of these phone calls. Can you tell us specifically who called you? Do you know?
Yes, I got a call from the head of the DHS transition team about 7:15 that Friday night.
And can you tell us what that person said?
It's along the lines of what it is that you've summarized, which was that I'd be allowed to stay through the change in administrations, but that would be temporary, and that he had assumed that I was already in the process of looking for another job.
Did the Trump official indicate that they had any concerns about your performance?
No, they did not.
And how long is your current term supposed to go?
Well, I serve at the pleasure of the President, so I can be removed at any time by the President, with obviously 30 days' notice to Congress.
And so were you surprised by the call? And what was your reaction?
Well, yes, I was surprised by the call, given sort of the tradition that inspectors general aren't removed from office typically or historically. So I immediately, of course, called Michael Horowitz and pulled him out of a hockey game on Friday night to report this information.
Was he playing or what?
It was a Capitals game, so I certainly hope not.
Fortunately not.
We have obtained a transcript from a voicemail left by a Trump official with another Inspector General. The voicemail said, and I quote, "I'm calling on behalf of the presidential transition team to inform you that you are being held over on a temporary basis to continue working in the capacity of Inspector General following the inauguration," end of quote. So that is also consistent, telling the IG that his position is only temporary. Mr. Horowitz, you are the head of the IG organizing body, SIGI. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Can you please tell us about how you learned about these calls?
The first call I got was from Mr. Roth as I was sitting at the hockey game. Spoke to him from the game, then got word of two other IGs who had received similar or had received calls that evening. I'm not sure when I knew exactly what they had heard. And we arranged a call for Saturday amongst several of us in the IG community, including the three IGs who got calls, several additional individuals, Inspector General Buller, myself, the Vice Chair of SIGI, Vice Chair of the Ledge Committee, to try and understand who got calls, who didn't get calls, in part because all three IGs reported that they were told that all IGs were going to be getting the call. But when we got on the call Saturday morning, more of us who were on the call had not gotten calls than had gotten calls. So we were trying to figure out what was going on here, and different people, the three individuals who got the calls got that sort of core information as well as some other information just from the dialogue back and forth. And so what we really tried to do that weekend, and it was a holiday weekend, it was the Martin Luther King holiday weekend, we set about trying to figure out how could we reach out to transition officials to understand what was going on, given the calls three people got, the fact that the message was all IGs were going to get the call, but not all IGs had gotten the call, at least at that point, and just to try and better understand where we were.
And how were the IGs feeling about these calls, if you know? What was the sense of concern?
I think fair to say everybody was concerned without knowing more as to what was the message here. Was this a message like Mr. Roth got about planning to move on? Was it some misunderstood? We just didn't know enough. Frankly.
And would you tell us what happened over the next, with the Chair's indulgence, please, did you tell us what happened over the next few days, and what did you do, what did others do, and how did you express this concern to the Trump team?
Certainly, and to be clear, I learned a lot more Tuesday when we came back to work, because Tuesday morning was the monthly IG meeting, so all IGs got together at 10 a.m. on Tuesday morning.
Well,
but I'll talk about what I knew over the weekend till I got to Tuesday. Until Monday, we learned of only the three calls. We reached out through the various contacts we each had on the call to people we thought who could try and connect us to other people to get to the Trump transition team. We didn't have any clear lines into higher-level Trump transition folks. We had contacts at our agency-level transition teams, but we were clearly looking to go beyond that.
Sitting here today, can you tell us how many IGs got the calls and voicemail?
By Tuesday morning after the SIGI meeting, I'm guessing, and I don't have an exact number, I'm guessing it's upwards of 6 to 10.
Can you survey that and get that information back to us, if you don't mind?
Yeah.
And Mr. Horwitz, as I close, I understand that someone seemed to inform at least some of the IGs that the decision had been overruled by higher-level officials within the Trump team. Who informed you of that, and what were you told? And I was just curious.
Yeah. So on Monday, I believe it was, we heard back from staff for this committee, majority staff for this committee, that they had heard through their contacts with the transition team or their contacts and the Senate Homeland Security Governmental Affairs Committee's contacts with the transition team that the call shouldn't have been made. It was a lower-level decision that had not been vetted at a higher level, that there was no plan to remove all IGs, and that the IGs would be getting calls to let, the IGs that got calls would be getting calls to let them know those calls shouldn't have been.
And do you all have anything in writing saying that?
I don't.
And well, we're going to try to see if we can get you something in writing.
If I could just add, I
Yeah,
learned
please
on
do.
Tuesday morning that also on, I think, either Sunday or Monday, an IG had gotten a call from Mr. McGahn, who's now the White House counsel.
And do you know who that IG was?
The
one
IG
that
at the Federal Election Commission.
okay.
Who knew Mr. McGahn because he had been a member of the commission at one point, providing her with the same message that we had heard, that I had heard on, I think it was Monday, from majority staff.
There you go.
I then got a call this past Friday from Mr. McGahn, consistent with what he had told the IG at the FEC, that he would be reaching out to me to essentially say the same thing to me that he had told her on that Martin Luther King holiday.
But we're going to try to get the IG something in writing, because I think it's very important that they have that document. When you come to people's jobs and their families and their welfare, but more importantly, their morale and their security, I think it's important that they have a document saying that that is simply not the case, and we'll work to make that happen. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for your indulgence. I really appreciate it.
We'll recognize now the gentleman from Texas, our new subcommittee chairman, Mr. Farenthold.
Thank you, Chairman Chaffetz. And I want to shift to a little bit of dollars and cents questions here. And Mr. Roth, I know that in your statement you draw attention to the wastefulness in acquisition programs. It's something we hear in Congress all the time, how government spends a whole lot more money than it should acquiring things, and takes longer to deploy them and delivers less capability than promised. And obviously you can look within the Department of Homeland Security, the TSA and their puffer machines and warehouses full of equipment that either doesn't work, doesn't get deployed, or both. What all are y'all doing to reduce waste in acquisition?
Well, certainly one of the things that we're doing is an increased emphasis on acquisition reform and acquisition auditing. So that's one of the things that we really didn't have a capability of, say, 3 years ago. And thanks to Congress appropriating additional funds for more FTEs, we're able to actually focus on this issue more than we had before. So that's one aspect of what we're doing. The other aspect of what we're doing is to try to ensure legislation that will put guidelines in place for the Department of Homeland Security as to their major acquisitions, what they have to do, increased reporting both to the IG as well as to Congress to ensure that major acquisitions continue on track. But really our emphasis is on further auditing of these programs, including what we call life cycle auditing, which is we don't wait until all the money is spent and then we say, well, you just wasted $1 billion on an acquisition. Rather, we go in sort of while the requirements, for example, are being developed, and then later on during the course of the acquisition to ensure that it's on track.
I mean, you talk about billions of dollars. There's been 11 years and $1.5 billion spent on an IT system for the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service, and you're still using a paper system there. And actually, Homeland Security is one of the more tech-savvy agencies in the government. But I mean, we see the same thing with a system, IT system in the VA. What's the big stumbling block in the government to being able to use computers that every corporation and small business and middle school student are able to do?
Well, a couple things. One, the size and complexity of some of these projects are enormous. So when you're talking about the immigration system, these are, literally millions and millions of files. The tempo, the operational tempo of CIS is just enormous. And I'm certainly not apologizing for them or excusing what it is that they do, because they have a paper-based system.
But I mean, you got the airlines that do billions of transactions. You've got credit card companies that are able to do these transactions. You've got ExxonMobil, a global corporation that has a reasonable IT system, but the government can't do it.
Right. Well, a couple things. One is that there was never a structure in place to do the acquisitions correctly. That was the first issue. Two, the expertise, that is getting the personnel who actually understand these and have the ability to do the acquisition, I think has been a challenge. And thirdly, the acquisition process itself in the government is incredibly burdensome compared to, I think, private.
And I think we need to spend some time, Mr. Chairman, and we'll continue looking into how we reform that. And I want to give the other IGs here, I don't think any of you guys, agencies, with exception maybe Justice, has anywhere near the acquisition budget Homeland Security does. But are you seeing similar problems within acquisition of your department? I mean, we'll just go down the line. We'll start with you, Mr. Horowitz.
We are doing more and more contract audits, and we have nowhere near the contracting that DHS does. But we are seeing challenges at DOJ. We saw it at the FBI when we looked at their effort to move to a computer-based system for handling all their paperwork.
Peace Corps, Ms. Bueller?
Peace Corps doesn't have a large acquisition program, but the contracting function has always been a problem. It's been a management challenge for the past couple of years. The challenge at Peace Corps is more in line with the staff leaving every 2 to 5 years. We have a 30% turnover rate in the Peace Corps per year.
And Mr. Dahl?
Similar to Mr. Horowitz, we're finding problems with the contracting and the processes they're using for contracting and the approaches they're using. And we issued an audit that we provided to this committee last year on using a time and materials contract long beyond its time of necessity.
All right, and so finally, I see I'm just about out of time, Mr. Horowitz. I would challenge you to work within your organization. What is most helpful to us in Congress are some concrete recommendations of what to fix. And I would like to put that on your whiteboard of things to do.
Absolutely. We will get you some.
Thank you. Yield back.
Chair now recognizes the gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Maloney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'd like to thank all of the panelists and thank you for all of your hard work. And really to build on what Blake Farenthold was saying, you perform really valuable work in just the contracting area. It's over $400 billion, the private contracts, and you're overseeing this system and making sure that it works well. But recently, the President came out with a hiring freeze, and there's no time limit on it. So I'm just wondering how that is going to impact your ability to do your job, particularly when reports show that your job actually saves taxpayers' money. The Council of the Inspector General on Integrity and Efficiency released a report to the President in 2015 that provided impressive cost savings that resulted from the work of IGs. For example, for every dollar invested in IGs, the report said the government has a potential saving of $14. That's an incredible rate of return on investment. And I think that shows that freezing your departments or freezing all of you is really going to harm taxpayers. In 2015, the report explained that the federal government spent a total of approximately $2.7 billion on offices of IGs, which means that from that investment, those offices saved our federal government approximately $35 billion. Mr. Buller, these are impressive numbers, correct? Or anybody, you want to comment on how the IGs have saved money for the taxpayers in the compounds that you have? And also, what's it going to be like to have this hiring freeze? I mean, do we have vacant IG posts now that are not filled? How many are not filled? Does anyone know? And what is the impact of this hiring freeze?
Just on the vacancies, there are 9 vacancies of the 36, so 25%. The presidentially appointed IG positions are vacant. There are 2 agency-level IG positions vacant, 2 agency-appointed IG positions that are vacant, and then the architect of the Capitol position, which is a congressional position, is vacant. So there are 12 total vacancies right now in the IG community. In terms of the hiring freeze, it is a concern of ours. We were hit very hard during sequestration. It did impact our ability to do our work. We were pleased yesterday to see the guidance issued by OMB and OPM on the hiring freeze in the sense of acknowledging that IGs are agency heads for purposes of evaluating the exemptions, but that doesn't solve the problem entirely, obviously. And so we're looking forward to working with the incoming OMB director, the incoming head of OPM, and Congress as we go through the appropriation process, because you're right, ultimately what will happen if we are reducing and cutting staff and limiting our ability to do our audits is the waste, fraud, and abuse that we root out regularly will be impacted.
Is there any place where all of the waste, fraud, and abuse is put together in one report of what the IGs have meant to the taxpayer?
We do an annual report to the President of the United States and post it publicly.
I'd like to see that annual report.
We will send it to you.
And I'd like to really suggest to my colleagues that we might look at some type of 2-tiered approach in the hiring freeze, that if it's an agency that is making the government more efficient, saving taxpayers' dollars, as IGs do, then it should have an urgency of being filled and not left vacant. You mentioned presidential IGs. What's the difference between a presidential appointed IG and another IG? I thought all IGs were treated the same. They're not?
They're the same under the statute in terms of protections. The difference is the 36 of the 73 IGs are nominated by the President and have to be confirmed by the Senate. 37 of the 73 IGs are appointed by their agency heads.
Okay.
And
Is
don't go through Senate
it tied to the agency?
It's tied to the agency.
It's tied to the agency. I'd like to see the list of which,
You can do that.
for the committee. I think the committee would like to see which are presidential and which are not. My time has expired, and I thank you very much for the work that you do for our country. I love the Peace Corps. Okay.
Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Florida, Mr. DeSantis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome. Mr. Horwitz, I know that you've opened up an investigation into the FBI's handling of the Clinton email case. As part of that, are you going to look into aspects of the case, such as why a grand jury was never impaneled?
We have announced the initiation, and one thing I do want to make clear, as we tried to make clear in our announcement, it covers not only what the FBI did, but what the Department did as well. And
okay, so some of the concerns that have had, and I know there have been concerns on all sides, why a grand jury was never impaneled, the unusual immunity agreements that were generated, allowing some of the subjects of the investigation to actually appear as lawyers for Secretary Clinton, the Loretta Lynch, Bill Clinton infamous airport meeting, and why the Attorney General didn't recuse herself. So all that could potentially be looked at.
Correct.
Okay.
That was the purpose of trying
Because
to
I think it
keep
was
the work-
reported that you were only trying to look at the FBI, and so that, I'm comforted by that, because I think there are legitimate questions on all sides, but if you're only going to focus on one thing when there were other questions, so that's good. Mr. Roth, you've been very upfront about trying to root out some of the bribery and corruption involved in the agency, particularly with regards to immigration and border security. There was a big New York Times article that came out, I think, just at the end of last year. That's going to be a focus of the administration with securing the southern border. So what is going on right now? Is there any update? Is this still a persistent problem? I know it's been a priority of yours. Is there anything we can do to try to address it? Because we spend all this time on trying to get the policy right, but if there's problems with implementation and then there's incentives for corruption, then that obviously is going to undermine everything we're doing.
Right. I mean, this is definitely a high-risk area. Anytime that you have a southwest border where you have, the Mexican cartels with the kinds of resources and the kind of creativity that they have, certainly the sort of that frontline defense is always going to be vulnerable. So there always has to be watchfulness, both by the agency itself, CBP, as well as Border Patrol and ICE, but also by us to oversee some of the overseers. We are, candidly, challenged by resources. We have one agent for every 2,000 employees and contractors, so it is an enormous challenge to be able to tackle this.
So
I think
more
public
resources to your office could potentially save the taxpayer a greater amount of resources on the back end if they're being employed successfully?
These individuals have keys to the kingdom. I mean, literal keys to the gates that are on the southwest border, so absolutely.
Yeah, well, we want to work with you on that because this is important. I want the border secured, but I don't want to get in a situation where we're putting a lot of effort in and then we're being undermined. Mr. Dahl, you note in your testimony that the unemployment insurance program was the 7th highest amount of improper payments among all federal. I think it was $3.5 billion, correct? Do you have any idea what the total number of improper payments for federal government-wide was for 2015?
For 2016, it was $144 billion, I believe.
I think that's right. My number, I have the 2015 number, $136.7 billion. And then I think since 2004, the cumulative amount of improper payments has been over $1 trillion. Does that sound accurate to you?
Correct.
So what tools can Congress provide that could aid in preventing some of these improper payments? Because we talk about different waste in the government. There is a lot of waste, but these improper payments, I mean, that's real significant money. And we kind of do oversight over it, but I would like to get to a point where we're doing something so that it doesn't happen to begin with. So do you have any recommendations for us?
Certainly. I think one of the tools that we needed, you provided us in the IG Empowerment Act, and that is relief from the Computer Matching Act, that allows us now to take data in one agency and match it against data in another agency to provide investigative leads or even program integrity leads to the department. And I think that's going to help us a lot.
Have you seen results yet?
Well, we just got the authority, and so we're exploring avenues to do that in my agency, and I know others are doing it as well. And I think that will assist us. This is even for our unemployment insurance, improper payments, the level of improper payments has remained the same for years. And even after we've done audits and multiple investigations, and I think sometimes the program fixes are what's necessary, and some of the vulnerabilities in the programs need to be patched, and we've made recommendations to the department to fix those. And I think with help from Congress
do those require legislation, or can they be done by the agencies?
Both.
Okay, well, keep us posted. I'm getting out of time, but keep us posted on the implementation. Want to make sure that's working. And then if the agency's not taking the action, if there's things we can do here, I know the committee would be interested in helping you guys out. Thank you.
Thanks.
Before I go to the next member, I want to recognize myself for a follow-up on that in regard to the improper payments. Having looked into that, I think it was in 2015, where we had the $130-something billion in improper payments, $60 billion of that were improper payments to hospitals related to Medicare. Are you looking into that? Is that something the IG's office is looking into?
Yeah, the IG's office from Health and Human Services, that is a primary mission that they have, and they are working on that. Dan Levinson, the IG, just spoke about that recently and the efforts that he's making to beat down those numbers. And that is the primary driver for the improper payments. Yes.
There's another $17 billion improper payments related to Medicaid, which would involve the states as well. Are you looking into that?
And his office is looking into that and spending a considerable amount of time on that issue.
The Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Lynch, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I want to thank you for your willingness to testify this morning, and thank you for all the work that you do and the people behind you, the work that they do. We obtained what we believe is an email from the Trump team to their political officials ordering them to make a round of calls to their assigned agencies, telling the IGs that their jobs are only temporary. That's up on the board. I don't know if we could blow that up a little bit, but I'll read it anyway for those who can't read it off the screen. The email was sent on January 13, 2017 at 6:36 p.m. It is from someone on the presidential transition team, and it is to the transition, quote, team leads. Mr. Horowitz, you got any idea who the team leads are?
I am presuming it's the agency teams, given what I understood happened over the weekend, but I'm obviously don't
So
have
the
any
people
further
that the
insight.
transition team assigned to each department, each agency, that would probably be
That would be my guess.
Okay. The subject line also quotes "tonight" in capital letters. I don't know if that's blocked out. It might be redacted, huh? Oh, no, it's up there on subject line "tonight" in capital letters. And then it says this, and I'm going to quote from it. Quote, "Thank you for getting us the IG information earlier today so that we could vet. As a critical follow-up to that, could you please reach out tonight and inform," and tonight again is in bold, "and inform the IGs in your respective agencies that they are being held over on a temporary basis. Please leave a message if you don't reach them." Has anybody else seen this email before? Anybody?
I did see it sometime during that following week.
Okay. Mr. Roth, you say?
Yeah, after the fact, yes.
Yeah.
I did as well after the fact.
I didn't see it.
Okay, all right. Mr. Horowitz, if this email is accurate, it indicates that there was a coordinated campaign to call multiple IGs, and from your previous testimony, and this was not some junior rogue employee working out of a sub-office. This is really very methodical, that 6 to 10 IGs got the call, that this thing went out, and then there's another process in retraction. Do you agree?
I know what, it says here and what the calls that went out and then got.
Do you have any idea what the urgency was?
I have no idea. I was not one, by the way, who got a call.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Roth, do you have any idea what the urgency was?
I do not. I asked the team lead for DHS why this was happening, and he said he was simply passing on a message that he had gotten from his higher-ups.
The email mentions vetting the IGs. Any idea what that would require? I mean, under the IG statute, you're required to, have certain skills, accounting, legal background. Any idea what the vetting might require?
No idea.
Okay. Look, let me just get back to what Mr. Cummings talked about earlier. We've had a pattern of conduct here on the part of the new administration. First, they try to eliminate the ethics office. They put a gag order on federal employees. They put a hiring freeze on employees. Energy Department personnel, they want to do an inquisition on anybody who used science in the conduct of their business. And this ban on all Muslims, now it's been backed off to a few countries, but even U.S. citizens who were Muslims and people who were here legally also fell under that. And then after the fact, they go back But the problem is that it has this chilling effect. And I know that each of you, and look, you've all been up here before, you're frequent flyers to this committee, we've seen your work, you do a great job. You know, when Mr. Madison and Mr. Hamilton set up this government, they put in checks and balances so that one person couldn't screw it all up. And we're going to test that system that they created over the next 4 years. We need you, look, you each, and a lot of people in the audience there, you each took an oath of office. You took an oath. You took an oath to uphold the Constitution. We need you to do your jobs. We need you to do your jobs, not just when it's easy, but when you get somebody pushing against you that might want something else. So we just ask you, do your jobs, uphold the Constitution, and we'll get through this. Thank you. I yield back.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Issa, for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. Horowitz, good to see you again. I had never had any doubt you'd be held over. Let me go through this, and first I want to say that I'm concerned that the transition team, now defunct, certainly could have done a better job in informing people who are technically serve at the pleasure of the President that they were in fact going to be retained. And there's plenty of examples of people who got almost to the inauguration day and kept saying, do I leave or do I stay? And many of them are people that wanted to stay and the administration wanted to keep. But I want to be very, very crucial in getting to the bottom of this, because it's been alleged that this was done to have some sort of a chilling effect. So I just want to go through a couple of questions to the extent that you know, and anyone else can pipe in if they have better knowledge. I've Googled this individual. Appears to be a very junior person with nothing to show anything other than LinkedIn and Facebook. So I can't find that this is a high-ranking person. Do you have any opinion about whether this was somebody who was to have a major position of authority, or is just someone sending this?
To be honest, I have no idea who the person is or what their role was.
Right, and I only know what Google tells me in this case. So it appears as though this is somebody, quite frankly, who was put on the transition team like hundreds of other people. The date on this is January 13, 2017. So is it fair to say that this person had no authority at that time, because no one on the transition team had authority until January 20th, legally?
Yeah, again,
Right.
part of the issue we had on that Friday night and Saturday and over the weekend was trying to figure out what this was and who it was from, because clearly there were people giving the message, as you said, you're staying or you're going.
Right.
And we didn't know what this message was.
Were there any IGs terminated on January 20th?
No.
So 100% of the IG in place, both permanent and acting, were retained, is that right?
We're still here.
And that's all tradition, basically. It's not common for mass dismissals or even minor dismissals in the IG community historically, right?
Right. It hasn't happened in the last 4 transitions.
Okay, so from an action standpoint, it was business as usual. But technically, there was a question of would you or wouldn't you be held over, is that correct?
Well, because of these calls, I, again, was not one to get them, so I'll defer to others on that issue.
Did all of you receive confirmation, other than this, that you would be retained? No. So how did you come to work the next day on January 21st?
We just showed up.
The Monday. You just showed up. Okay. You know, again, I want to say that we're not going to let this sit here. I do want to know, unfortunately, the one challenge I think we have is the transition team is now defunct, and we're really looking at toward the future. And to that future, have any of you begun working with new political appointees yet to try to listen whether they are going to support the continued work of the IG and perhaps even greater? Mr. Roth?
Yeah.
You have a boss, so how's it going?
I do have a boss, and in fact, I met with Secretary Kelly on that Thursday of the first week, and he announced his firm support of the IG concept and
When he was
me
at,
personally. So.
when he was at Central Command and so on, I mean, or Southern Command, he had a long history of using his IGs.
He appreciates the value that we add.
Okay.
We obviously don't have a new Attorney General at
You're
this
so
point,
close.
but we do have some new leadership positions in the Office of Attorney General, Office of Deputy Attorney General, and I did meet with them last Friday and engaged with them on some of the issues that were pending and some of the matters they were likely to be seeing soon from us.
Okay, and just for the record, and I think not just for you, but for all of your colleagues, certainly I would hope that every IG would feel very free to contact any member of this committee, including obviously the chairman, should there be anything that would resemble interference or inability to do the job. I have one final closing question. Since the implementation of the Act of last year is fairly new, do any of you have current examples where you're still not getting information covered by the you get everything except, and the exceptions are supposed to be virtually zero? And I know, Mr. Horowitz, I want all of your answers, but I know you've had a history of being blocked, particularly as to attorneys at Department of Justice.
We have had no issues whatsoever, and there's been a significant change in approach.
Excellent. Glad to hear it. Anyone else?
At Peace Corps, before the former director left, she put out a joint communication with me, basically saying that we have access to everything now, including...
Especially the assaults and harassment and the actual rapes and so on that historically were a problem for you.
Yes.
Mr. Dahl?
We've made significant progress in overcoming some of the delays that we were experiencing in getting access to records.
Excellent. Well, the committee's done good work. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Connerly, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to our panel. My friend from California wants to minimize what just occurred, and I understand that from his point of view, but there's nothing trivial about getting 6 or 7 phone calls to individual inspectors general, including yourself, Mr. Roth, from a transition team on the eve of the inauguration, all but warning you you're going to be replaced, or it could be. And then we saw the redacted document, and I'd love to have some Republican support in making sure that those redactions are removed and we get the actual full document. But
gentlemen, the chairman or the ranking member indicated he would make it available to us. He has that.
I don't, Mr. Horowitz, you're the head of SIGI. I assume you took that seriously and you saw the gravity of the issue. There was nothing minimal or trivial about these communications to your colleagues.
Absolutely took it very seriously. That's why we worked all weekend on the holiday weekend making calls.
And I assume the source of your alarm wasn't just the personal careers of your colleagues, though that's of concern, but the overall impact of those communications in terms of the potential for politicization of the IG office itself.
I think it's fair to say that all of us, including those who got the calls, were concerned not just about their own positions, but about the institution itself.
Right. And so you saw a potential threat.
Correct.
And although the President has the power, because half of your colleagues serve at will in a sense, they serve at the pleasure of the President, and are subject to Senate confirmation, I will read to you the author of the Inspector General Act of 1978, a former colleague, Representative L.H. Fountain. And he said, "It was never intended, however, that the inspectors general be automatically replaced on a wholesale basis without regard to their individual merits whenever there is a change in administration," unquote. Now, I know originalists don't want to pay any attention to legislative history, but the rest of us mere mortals, especially those of us who write the laws up here, actually do pay attention to the intent behind legislation and the words accompanying the introduction or passage of legislation, especially by the author of the legislation. Would you agree with that sentiment? Is that your understanding, Mr. Horowitz, that it was never intended to have a wholesale replacement, even though the power technically certainly is there with the President?
I would note that the only time that had occurred, which was in 1981.
Ronald Reagan.
President Reagan removed and then unremoved several IGs. This committee, or the Committee on Government Operations, it was then called, issued a unanimous report stating almost precisely the words that you've just quoted, Congressman.
Thank you. So there is actually history here going back to 36 years in terms of trying to make sure we're not politicizing or wholesale removing and replacing inspectors general because of the concern about perception and about independence of office. Is that correct, Mr. Horowitz?
That's correct.
I didn't mean to stop you. I think you were going to say something.
I just note what is important to us on this issue is the bipartisan unanimous support for IG independence.
Yep.
And that principle, because everybody, I think, who knows the work we do understands that's the foundation on our work. If we're not independent, we cannot do what we're doing.
That's right. Speaking of which, as the head of SIGI, a terrible acronym,
I use Council of IGs to try and get away from it.
Only the federal government could come up with something like that. SIGI.
Right.
I go to a SIGI meeting. We had a cocktail hour at SIGI. I mean, I don't know. Anyway.
No, we don't do
No,
that.
I know. Thought I'd give you that opportunity so you could deny that.
Right.
So one of the concerns I have, as you know, Mr. Horowitz, is that exactly this. IGs have to be above partisanship, have to be perceived as independent and objective, cannot be tainted with anything. And when there is a concern, it goes, unfortunately, from my point of view, there's very little accountability for anyone other than, I suppose, an agency head or the president with respect to IGs. And I wonder if you could just comment on what are we doing to try to make the process, when there is a concern or a complaint filed, that the process is more transparent, more thorough, more robust, and people are held accountable.
So on that point, I know we've had discussions in the past about the Integrity Committee and its operations and working on that. Many of the changes that are in the IG Empowerment Act address those issues and the concerns that this committee had, other members have, and we are actually right now in the process of trying to make those changes. And I'll just mention one of the issues that have come up. In order for some of the responsibilities to be transferred from the FBI, which had been the chair, to the SIGI and the IG on the committee, which is now the chair, is we need to get certain regulations cleared so that we can create Privacy Act notices and all the things that we have to do. And we're trying to understand how the regulatory freeze will impact our ability to do that. So we're trying to move forward in that regard and look forward to having further discussions with you about these issues.
Chair now recognizes the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Meadows, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank each of you for your work, and to the at-large IG community. Thank you so much for the work that you do. I can tell you that from my side of the aisle, I am going to be vigilant in making sure that your work continues on regardless of who is at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. We have your back. We believe in your independence, and anything that is out there to the contrary will be fought vigorously in a bipartisan way. And I know that my good friend from Virginia and I both agree on this particular aspect. That being said, I want to make sure that it is clear that to my knowledge, we have had no request to replace any IG, that there is a 30-day notice that has to be given to Congress, and there are 0 IGs that have been noticed to Congress. Do you understand that, Mr. Horowitz?
I do, and I also appreciated the call I got from Mr. McGahn on Friday making that point to me personally.
I'm at the very highest levels of this administration. I have had a very comforting assurance that the work that the IGs do and have done is not to say that the work that you've done, whether it's your reports, I'm one of those guys that'll stay up late and read your reports and read the footnotes and Mr. Roth and I have talked a couple of times on some of the reports that he and his team have done. And so let's not discount the work that we've done in the past, assuming that the recommendations have been there. But just because it's a new administration, I think it's important that we still follow up on those things. And so here would be my request of each one of you. As we look at the IG Empowerment Act, what I would like is, what are the two things that are creating barriers for its full implementation and I know we're very early in the process, but what are the two barriers that you're seeing either technically or legislatively or administratively in terms of actually implementing that? And then as we start to get that, anything that has a good intention also has components that perhaps are a byproduct that were not intended. Two areas that perhaps would be in a follow-up bill that could maybe either clarify or make life a little easier. Are all of you willing to get with the committee on that? All right. So if I were to classify the anxiety level for some in the IG community, would you classify it as on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being most anxious? Would you say that it's greater than 5, Mr. Horowitz?
I think it's fair to say now, having been the chair of the council for a couple of years, I think we're always anxious as a group. It's a group that has 73 very different opinions on everything, and I think you'd get 73 people coming up with different numbers.
All right. What can members of Congress do in a bipartisan way to assure the IG community that not only we value their work, but that we certainly do not want anything to stand in the way of you doing your work?
I think the key part is a hearing like today for us, coming here and hearing bipartisan support for our work, the efforts to reach out to the incoming administration, including individual agency heads, to make sure they understand, so not just this committee, but the other authorizing and oversight committees doing the same with each agency, making them clear. I think you have my assurance, and I think all of our assurances by coming here, that we stand united in fighting for the underlying principle of independence in this act. And we didn't spend years, certainly Kathy and I, fighting our agencies on access issues, the FBI and DEA testifying probably 15+ times, taking on those agencies because they weren't giving us access, to sort of hide and not come forward if there's efforts to push back. So we'll continue to let you know if we can't do our work.
So real quickly, a yes or no answer. Do I have your commitment to keep politics out of any analysis that you or your group does? And I'm going to go down them.
Absolutely.
Ms. Bueller?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, thank you. I'll yield back.
Thank you. The chair now recognizes the gentlewoman from New Jersey, Ms. Watson Coleman.
Thank you very much, and good morning to you. And I am sorry that I missed the beginning of the testimony, but I am delighted to see you here. And I want you to know that we support the work that you need to do, the resources that you need to do it, and the independence that you need to do it. I have a couple of questions. I'd like to actually speak to Mr. Horowitz for a moment. Mr. Horowitz, on November the 4th, Ranking Member Cummings and House Judiciary Committee Ranking Member Conyers sent you a letter after one of President Trump's closest and most vocal campaign advisors, Rudy Giuliani, acknowledged that he obtained leaked information several days before FBI Director Comey's now infamous letter to Congress about discovering potentially relevant emails. 2 days before Director Comey's letter, Mr. Giuliani stated, and I quote, "We've got a couple of things up our sleeve that should turn this around." He also stated that, and I quote, "a pretty big surprise was coming in 2 days," previewing when Director Comey sent his letter to Congress. During a follow-up interview, Mr. Giuliani confirmed this information and openly bragged about it. He stated, and I quote, "Did I hear about it? You darn right I heard about it." I understand that you can't speak to the specifics of your ongoing work at this point, but I want to ask some basic questions about the review's parameters. A, there is a review taking place. I guess that's a yes or
correct.
no.
We announced it on January 12th.
Thank you. Can you confirm that this review includes the allegations that the Department of Justice or the FBI personnel provided information directly or indirectly to outside sources?
Our announcement did say that we would look at the allegations that FBI employees and department employees improperly disclosed non-public information. And we will further define the scope of that as we now go forward and look at the issues.
Thank you, Mr. Horowitz. Now, Mr. Giuliani has subsequently said he did not get any information directly from active agents, but obviously, as a general matter, if active agents give information to someone who shouldn't have it, and those people then transfer it, that's just as bad. If you learned that information about the FBI's investigation was leaked to former FBI agents, who then potentially funneled it to others, I assume that you would need to speak with those former FBI agents as well. So my question to you is, do you have the authority to interview individuals outside the government if you deem that to be necessary? And can you assure us that the review of these allegations in particular will be thorough and follow the facts wherever they lead?
On the latter, I can certainly assure you it will be a thorough and fulsome review. On the former, we do not have the authority to compel individuals who are no longer Justice Department employees to speak with us. We had hoped to have that authority. The IG Empowerment Act that the chair, the ranking member, this committee supported had that authority. It got removed at the last minute over the objections of the Justice Department on the Senate side, and the final version did not include that. We do hope to get that authority, but at this point we do not have that authority.
So then, would you take the information that you have and the need that you would have to interview individuals no longer with government to some other element in the Justice Department and ask that it be pursued there, or is there no other avenue?
The only avenue for us is to make a voluntary request, and if individuals are willing to speak with us, we will have that opportunity. If individuals are unwilling to speak with us, there is no further way for us to compel them to speak with us, even if they have the most relevant information possible.
Thank you. Shortly after your announcement, Director Comey stated that he was grateful for the review and that the FBI will cooperate fully. Inspector Horowitz, will you let this committee know immediately if the FBI's cooperation is anything other than full and complete?
Absolutely, and to date we have gotten very strong cooperation.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Chair thanks the gentlewoman. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Ross.
Thank you, Chairman, and I want to thank the panel, as my colleagues on both sides of the aisle have, and recognize you for your dedication, the dignity and objectivity of your work, and hope that we can continue to be very supportive of you. Mr. Horowitz, to follow up on what my colleague, Ms. Watson-Coleman, was talking about, with regard to your investigative powers, oversight is so important, but holding oversight accountable is also so important that due process is necessary. And I think what you're speaking of is the deposition or testimony subpoena power that you do not have.
Correct.
So when you present a case to the DOJ, and they say, well, there's just insufficient evidence to go before a grand jury, or we don't think a criminal act has been committed, and yet you know or you feel confident that it may have, but you've been shorted, I think, your investigative powers. So without regard to an appropriation, what would you consider to be the most important tools that you would need to have? Subpoena testimony, subpoena ducis tecum testimony? What other things procedurally would be necessary in order to complete your case so that due process can ensue?
We have authority to subpoena documents.
Right.
The key is getting the subpoena authority to testify individuals who either are former employees or employees of contractors or grant recipients, because we're pursuing various misconduct.
And right now you don't.
And right now we don't.
So they either submit voluntarily to an interview, and once they have counsel, that'll never happen, or you just try to build a circumstantial case through voluntary witnesses who are third and fourth degree in the process. Is that?
That's correct. The only other option is if it's strong enough and the Justice Department decides to open a grand jury investigation, the prosecutor can then issue grand jury subpoenas, but you need to get to that point.
Right, you need to get to that point, but okay. Let me ask you, the panel collectively, and we'll go through here. One of the issues that I've had a big concern about is official time spent by federal workers when they're on the clock, but they're doing union activities. I've filed a bill for the last several sessions wanting a report from OPM of official time spent by federal workers. Is this something that either one of you have done or have had a request to do in your duties? And I'll start with you, Mr. Horowitz.
We have not had that request made of us. The only component in I think the only component in the department with the union, the BOP has a union, but most of the other parts of the Justice Department do not have, are not.
Is that something that you would do if you were requested to do?
What I'd like to do is consider the issue, talk with my auditors about it, and try and understand better what it would entail for us.
They've done it in the past. OPM has produced it in the past, but they don't do it routinely, and so that's my issue. Ms. Buller?
We've never done one, nor have we had a request to do it.
Do you think it's important? Do you think that it's something, I mean, I don't know, to what degree do you have union workers with the Peace Corps?
Peace Corps does have a union, but I would have to check once again, as Mr. Horowitz would, to see how strong the union is and the number of members and whether or not there would be
I mean, in some cases, that's their full-time job, is to be the union representative, and then they're being paid on official time to be doing that. And I just think that that's a significant event that ought to be monitored and reported to the taxpayers. Mr. Dahl?
We have not received a request specifically to look at that either.
And in order to have you pursue that request, who would it have to come from? Would it have to come from the administration? Would it have to come from this committee?
Various sources. The committee could ask us to look at it. And it's something that if we would determine that it's a risk for the department and it's a problem, we would initiate it on our own.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Mr. Roth, any?
Same answer. We have not looked at that. I mean, we do have a number of federal employee unions and Customs and Border Patrol, the Border Patrol.
But nobody's ever made a request on you as the IG?
We have not, and we've not looked at it independently.
Okay, I appreciate it. That's all I have. I yield back. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Chair now recognizes the gentlewoman from Florida, Ms. Demings, for 5 minutes.
And I apologize if we've already covered this since I was late coming into the room. I believe I heard you say, Mr. Horowitz, that you do not have the subpoena power to require retired FBI agents to come and testify. But could you possibly ask the chairman of this committee to subpoena a retired FBI employee?
We wouldn't, and I don't think, we wouldn't go and do that, but by way of example, when we were unable in our Fast and Furious review to interview the former U.S. attorney who had resigned, we could not get the evidence. We actually came to this committee, which had subpoenaed the individual, and the committee agreed to share with us the testimony it had done of the individual's testimony. So that is an avenue we've used. It's obviously not the preferred avenue, and that only occurred because we were on parallel tracks with our investigations. That normally will not be the case.
Okay. Thank you.
Chair now recognizes the gentlewoman from the District of Columbia, Ms. Norton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I have a question regarding what appear to be violations already of an act that this committee has championed, the Whistleblower Protection Act. Indeed, I note, ironically, that this afternoon we're having a hearing on 5 years of the Whistleblower Protection Act. That was passed unanimously by this committee. Yet I note that there have been disturbing signs of the Trump administration trying to silence dissent among employees of the federal government. Several agencies, I note EPA and HHS in particular, have received gag orders that employees could not communicate with the public. Amazingly, and I'm going to ask the chairman if this committee would look into reports that employees could not even talk to Congress. Now, these orders appear to clearly violate the whistleblower laws. Are any of you currently investigating or planning to look into non-disclosure policies or directives issued by your agencies?
We are. We've had some issues with whistleblowers, for example, notifying us of potential retaliation as a result of giving us information or giving someone else information. They ultimately settle their case for whatever they get from the agency. The agency then requires basically a gag order. So then we're unable to interview those whistleblowers because, again, our whistleblower retaliation investigations have two purposes. One is, of course, to make the whistleblower whole, but the other is to determine whether discipline needs to be imposed on whoever it was that did the retaliation. So I think that's a defect in the system that we have at DHS, and we're going to be looking at that and potentially writing a report about that.
Yes. Any of the rest of you had any such experience? Mr. Horowitz?
We don't have anything going on now, but obviously we have authority over FBI whistleblower provisions, and we obviously now, in light of recent legislation, authority over whistleblower retaliation cases involving contractors and grant recipients, and we are seeing more and more of them, and we're handling them as they come in. And these are important matters, and it's important for new leadership in the agency to understand the scope of the whistleblower protections, the whistleblower laws. I think it's very important for incoming officials, particularly those who haven't been in the government before or have experience with federal whistleblower laws, to understand the impact of the Supreme Court's decision in the McLean case in 2015, because that was a case that has could have a very significant impact, and even after it was released by the court in 2015, we found instances where some components within the Department of Justice didn't appreciate the impact of it, and we had to explain to them why it limited actions they might want to have taken against individuals who spoke out publicly.
Yes, Ms. Buhler?
At the Peace Corps, we actively investigate any allegations of whistleblower retaliation. We've had several cases in the past, and we continue to aggressively pursue any allegation of whistleblower.
Could I ask if any of these instances you indicated are recent?
We continue to get complaints in. I wouldn't say we have anything like what you've mentioned at DOJ at this point that have made news at other agencies.
Yeah, because the EPA and the HHS got these specific orders. Now, they could chill people, and I'm sure there are federal employees that are chilled to the bone. But look for example, there's an official channel at the State Department. It's a dissent channel. It's been there for a very long time. And some State Department officials expressed their dissent on one of the President's executive orders, and the public affairs officer came forward and said they should either get with the program or they should go. Shouldn't federal employees be concerned about such comments and their potential impact of using official channels like whistleblower channels if these fairly high-level State Department people were essentially told to shut up or get out?
I'll just say it's certainly a concern for me, and I know for the IG community as a whole, to ensure that there is no chilling effect on whistleblowers coming.
So how can you do that? How can you assure, how can you make employees know that?
Well, one of the ways we do it is through our ombuds programs that Congress helped create. It's very important for us to not only train employees within the department, but to train new employees joining the department on the scope of the whistleblower laws, and make sure they understand that individuals are allowed to come forward where they reasonably believe there are violations of law, rules, regulations, and there cannot be a personnel action, which is very broadly defined in the law, taken against them. People need to get whistleblower training upon coming into agencies, and the IG community needs to be working with their agencies to make sure that occurs.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Grothman, for 5 minutes.
Okay, we'll talk to you, Mr. Dahl, for a second. Is that okay? The Federal Employees Compensation Act program spending on compounded drugs rose dramatically from $2 million, I think, in 2011 to $200 million in 2016, and I think it's anticipated to double again last year when the final numbers are in. Have you looked into that issue at all?
Yes, we have, Congressman, and we have multiple investigations around the country. We're working with other OIGs, including Postal Service OIG, that's been very active on this issue, and VA OIG, HHS OIG, and the Department of Defense OIG. In addition, we have an audit that we're doing right now of the rising costs of compounding and why that occurred and what the department is doing to manage those costs.
Do you feel you can comment on it now, or you don't want to comment yet? I mean, going up from $2 million to $600 million in 5 years is kind of a dramatic thing.
Right. You know, it looks like that it didn't increase as much in 2016 as was expected, but the increase was still substantial enough that that we are working with the department to recommend programmatic fixes. They sent out a letter of medical necessity that require providers to complete now before they can prescribe compounded medications. And that appears to have had some ameliorative effect on the costs of compounded drugs. But this is a very big risk that we're concerned about, and we're also concerned about the fact that the FECA program didn't see this coming until very recently.
Okay, maybe this is an example of what you were talking about. There's apparently a tube of cream that we're paying $32,000, or a case for $32,000 with a compound found in wine that isn't even approved by the FDA. You want to comment on that?
Well, in our investigations, we have found several of these pain creams that are used as topical creams, and the costs that we're getting billed for, that FECA is being billed for, is exorbitant, tens of thousands of dollars for one prescription. And we're finding in many of our investigations that the patients didn't know that they were receiving this, didn't ask for it, or didn't ask for it to be refilled. And so we are concerned about that, and that's one of the avenues that we're pursuing in our investigations.
Good. Something to pursue. Do you think there are kickbacks involved there?
There are. We have found kickback schemes in many of our investigations where the prescribing pharmacies are paying kickbacks to doctors, or the dispensing pharmacies are paying kickbacks to the doctors to prescribe these medications.
Any states that are particularly involved in this, or parts of the country which you have more sleazy practices going on?
I don't want to comment on what parts of the country might be sleazy, but we are finding that these are grouped in certain geographic locations. We have investigations around the country, but many concentrated in Texas, in California, in Florida, and other states.
Okay. in an example of tuba cream, what condition would you have that they'd prescribe this for?
If they had surgery and they have pain from the surgery, or they have a back disability that they would be going to the doctor for. There are also creams that are prescribed for reducing scar tissue from following up on surgery.
$32,000 a tube, huh?
And that was for one of the medications that, and I think the Postal Service, OIG, found that. And we found multiple examples of, as I said, tens of thousands of dollars. Now, I want to note that, that there are certain patients and certain compounding medications that are have found to be beneficial, and we're concerned about the ones that, as you point out, are not approved by the FDA and are maybe being provided to patients who don't have the medical necessity to have those.
$32,000 for a prescription, one tube, and it might not do anything, huh? Kind of amazing. Well, that's why we're on OGR. We could just have hearings every day, couldn't we? Maybe we can have a whole hearing on that something later. Thank you very much for giving me my 5 minutes.
I thank the gentleman. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes, and I'd like to get the panel's views on a couple of questions regarding the referral of criminal matters to the Department of Justice. Over the last 4 years, what's your estimate of how long it took the DOJ to generally respond to your criminal referrals? And Mr. Horowitz, we can start with you.
I don't have any numbers sort of handy or available. I will say we get fairly prompt attention from the department and the prosecutors we work with regularly when we do go to them with cases.
Ms. Buller, was that your experience?
Yes, Peace Corps is a little different also because we also have usually complicated questions involving jurisdiction, so sometimes it takes a while to work through those.
Mr. Dahl?
Like Mr. Horowitz, we get prompt attention from the U.S. Attorney's offices and from the Department of Justice in our criminal referrals. We made 277 last year, and we had 322 convictions last year. And so we feel like across the country we get great support for our work.
Mr. Roth?
DOJ is highly decentralized with 94 different U.S. Attorney's offices. I would concur with Mr. Horowitz and Mr. Dahl that it's generally good, but there are some areas in which sometimes a little extra attention needs to be paid. But I don't foresee this as a systemic issue.
Do you have pending referrals left over from the last administration? The nods?
Yes.
Work on TV, but not, and not unless the camera's on you, so let the record show that the panel all said yes. How many are over a year old? Any? Do you have any that are over a year old?
I wouldn't think so. I can go back and check. Like I said, as a general matter, it's a fairly prompt response for us.
I don't believe we have any over a year old either.
Okay.
I don't believe we have one over a year, but we will check.
All right.
Likewise, that would be an extreme case.
Let me ask you something. Does the Inspector General's office have jurisdiction over a case in which a federal agency violated an international treaty?
I think if one of the department components violated a treaty, we presumably would have the authority to look at it. It would have to be a Department of Justice component, though, and we'd probably partner with the State Department IG if it was an international treaty, given their expertise and
But you could make that referral to the Department of Justice? You could?
If we found issues with regard to an allegation of misconduct related to a set of laws, including a treaty, yes, we would, I think, be able to do that. I can't think of a situation where that's arisen for us, although we have, as you know, done work with DEA's agents overseas, and the department does have overseas representatives.
Okay, thank you. And coming back to you, Mr. Horowitz, according to the website, there are 11 vacancies in the federal agency IG offices, and we've covered this a little bit. These offices are being led by acting IGs. Do you see a benefit for having a permanent inspector general rather than an inspector general in an acting capacity?
Yeah, I've testified to this before that, we've had and have extraordinarily committed and dedicated acting IGs filling these roles. I had the experience of coming in. My agency had a vacancy for 15 months before I arrived, and my deputy IG did an extraordinary job in the middle of the access fights, by the way, leading our office. She did a great job. But there's an ability to get things done that is present when you have confirmed leadership, certainly in the presidentially appointed Senate-confirmed positions, but also on the agency-level positions. There's an authority that goes with this and a presence and an ability to fight for issues that I think is important to have when you're dealing with agency leadership, that they know that you have the position full-time, and you're not sitting there waiting for the successor to show up.
Well, as many of the members on the committee have already expressed, we're very grateful for the work you do. We respect you and appreciate you, and I would like to thank the witnesses for taking time to appear before us today and for the members for their questions. If there's no further business, without objection, the committee stands adjourned.